Hello everybody and welcome. It's good to see everybody back, and this is the second of our videos on the past tenses. Last week we looked at past simple, and this week we're going to be looking all about the past perfect tense. So if you haven't already downloaded it, make sure you grab the worksheet. You can get them all using the link in the video description. This lesson we need page 2. Perhaps you've already had a go at working through some of the problems, and if so, you can check the answers as we go along. Or perhaps you're just downloading it now, in which case you can work through it with me, and we'll go through the answers together. Okay. Let's start off having a little bit of a chat about the past perfect tense, how it's formed, and when it's used. So we form the past perfect tense using the auxiliary verb had. Then we need the past participle of the verb that we want, of that main verb in our sentence. Last week we looked at a chart similar to this. And in this chart, it showed the base verb and it showed the past form. For example, play, the base verb, played, the past form. For regular verbs, that just involves adding ed. We know also that there are some irregular verbs. This week, because we're looking at past perfect, we're going to be focusing not on the past form of the verb, we're going to be looking at the past participle of the verb. And you can see it here in our chart, our last column. And again, we've got some regular verbs that we're going to be working with, but we've also got some irregular verbs to deal with. You can see that we've got a couple of each in this table here. Can you see which ones are regular and which are irregular? Okay, so we've got play, played, and played. That's a regular verb. We've also got close, closed, and closed. That's another regular verb. So quite often the past form and the past participle form of the verb are the same, but not always. Have a look at the verb eat. The base verb is eat. The past form is ate. So you might say, today I eat, yesterday I ate. For the past perfect form, that is using had, we can't say had ate. We must say had eaten. Okay, so that's a common irregular verb that we're going to need to know about. The bottom of the table also shows the verb go, another very useful verb. The past form is went, but this lesson we're interested in the past participles, and in that case it's gone. So we don't say had went, we say had gone. Past perfect is used to show events that began and ended in the past. Okay, so that's similar to the past simple. The difference is that it's used to show that one action occurred before another action in the past. For example, if we have a look at our sentence at the bottom, it says, he had read the book before it became popular. Have a look at the chart here. It shows two events in this sentence. In the first clause, which is past perfect, he had read the book. Then it's got a past simple clause, it became popular. He had read the book, happened before it became popular. So past perfect is often used to sequence events in the past. The clause with the past perfect occurs before the clause with the past simple. So this tense is often used in storytelling when we want to sequence something in order, or just when we want to show that one event happened before another in the past. And because it's used to sequence events, in the next slide here, we're going to have a look at some commonly used words or sequencing words that are used with this tense. And we're starting off with the with the word before. I'm using the same example that I used in the slide earlier, which was he had read the book before it became popular. So it's just good to know that we often do see the word before used with past perfect. Another word that we often see is after. It's another sequencing word. For example, in the sentence, she had left after I arrived. Okay, here we've got a phrase that's often used with past perfect. By the time. For example, by the time we got to the restaurant, they had already closed. You can see our past perfect is here. Had already closed. And already is another word that's often used, and you can see it's used in this sentence as well. Because again, it's talking about time, an event that has already occurred before another one. We've also got two more words here, since and never. Let's have a look at an example of since. They had been friends since they were children. Here's our past perfect. Had plus the past participle of be, which is been. Had been. And never. She had never visited London before last summer. And in this sentence, as well as never, we've also got before. So it's a very good idea to take note of these words. At the end of the lesson, when we start writing some of our own sentences, perhaps we can use some of these. Okay, and just like last week, before we get into the worksheet, let's go over a couple of vocabulary words that we're going to need to know. Take note of these if they are unfamiliar to you, but perhaps you already know them, which is just a great chance then to review them. I'm going to start off with exhausted. Exhausted, which is an adjective meaning really tired, extremely tired. You are exhausted. The next word is circus, which you can see right from the picture what it is. It's a traveling show, often with clowns and animals. We're going to be looking at the word depart, which means to leave or to go away from a place. And it's often used with transport. So if we're talking about the time that a plane might depart, or a train might depart the station, the time that it leaves. And the word politician. The politician, the person that we elect and we hope that they keep the promises that they make. Politician. Okay, take a moment just to have a look at some of those words and write them down if you need. Okay, let's move on to section 1 of the lesson. Section 1 of the worksheet. It says, complete the sentences using past perfect. Okay, over by the side, we can see the verbs that we're going to be using, starting with finish, work, forgot, depart. Okay, a couple of them already have one of those very frequently used words, which is already. So we're going to see if we can use already in the first sentence and in the last sentence. By the time I arrived, they had already finished dinner. So the base word is finish, the past form and the past participle in this case are both finished. So that's a regular verb, nice and easy. The next sentence, she was exhausted, and you'll remember that means lacking energy, being very tired. She was exhausted because she had worked all day. So we've got our auxiliary verb had, and then the past participle, which is worked, another regular verb. Tom realized now we've got forgot here, perhaps that should say forget, which would be the base verb. Tom realized we need the past participle. So the past form is forgot. The past participle is forgotten. That's an irregular verb. Tom realized he had forgotten to do his homework. And the last sentence. Depart, you'll remember, means to leave. The train had already departed before we arrived at the station. Okay, and again in these sentences there are some of the frequently used words such as before, and over here we've got the phrase by the time, which is also often used with past perfect. Okay, let's move on to the second section. We have to rewrite the sentences in past perfect. Kate saw the movie last week. Saw the movie. Here we're in past simple. For past perfect, we need the auxiliary verb had and then the past participle, which in this case is seen. Kate had seen the movie last week. The next one. The class completed all their work. The class had completed all their work. C. She never went to the circus before. Well, that sounds like a bit of a mistake there. We need she had never gone to the circus before. And the last one. They lived in the city for 10 years before they moved to the beach. They had lived in the city for 10 years before they moved to the beach. This last sentence is a good example of two past tenses being used together. We've got the clause written in past perfect. They had lived in the city for 10 years. And then we've got past simple. They moved to the beach. And we know that the clause written in past perfect happens first. So we know that this happened before this. How did you go with those first two sections? Okay, let's move on to section number 3. Here we have to find the error in each sentence and then rewrite them correctly. Did you find any errors? The first one says, she had did her homework by 7 o'clock. That one sounds a little bit awkward. And it looks like the problem here is that we've used the word had, so we're in past perfect, but here we've used the past form of the verb instead of the past participle. We need the verb done. She had done her homework by 7 o'clock. Okay, the next one. The politician had gave a speech in the city that morning. It looks like here we've got the same problem. Gave is the past form of give, but we need the past participle, which is given. The politician had given a speech in the city that morning. And the last one. He had left for work when you called him. Okay, take note here that there's a question mark. When we're forming questions, we need to make sure that our subject is in the right place. And here, this would be correct if it was an affirmative sentence, but for a question, we need to put had before the subject. Had he left for work when you called him? So you'll notice that these two needed to be switched around. He had should be had he to ask a question. Did you find the errors? Okay, let's move on to the last section. And here, just like the last section of our last lesson, we need to come up with some of our own sentences. Take a little moment now to think about sentences that you could form. Here we've got some phrases. before the party started, by the time they arrived, and already seen. So take a moment to think of a couple of sentences. If you've already written your sentences, you could think of a couple of others, or you might like to reread the sentence that you've written to make sure you're happy with them and make sure that you've used past perfect correctly. Okay, I am going to start my first sentence with trying to use the phrase before the party started. I'm going to say that she drove to the shops. Now, drove is the past form of drive. I'll need the past participle, which is driven. So I'm going to say she had driven to the shops before the party started. She had driven to the shops before the party started. Okay, my next one. Already seen. I'm going to say he had already seen the movie before it was released in theaters. Now my last one. By the time they had arrived. Or by the time they arrived. Here we go. By the time they arrived, what could have happened? By the time they arrived, we had already finished. We had already finished decorating. By the time they arrived, we had already finished decorating. Okay, I think I'm happy with my sentences. In each, it looks like I've got the auxiliary verb had and the past participle. Had driven, had seen, and had finished. How did you go with your sentences? If you've written any that you'd like to share, now would be a great time to do it as we've reached the end of the lesson. Well done for making it all the way through. And as I said, if you'd like to share your sentences in the comments, I'd love to see them. Otherwise, have a quick check-in with yourself. How did you go with this lesson? How well do you understand the past perfect tense? Do you know how it's formed? Do you know situations that it's used? Perhaps you remember some of the words like before, phrases like by the time or already that are often used with this tense. Perhaps you already knew that and it was just a little bit of a revision. And maybe you've picked up another couple of vocabulary words like circus or depart. If you've got any questions about the tense or about anything English related, feel free to ask those questions now as well. Otherwise, thanks very much for joining us. We're going to have another lesson next week, and I believe it's on past continuous. If you've downloaded the worksheet for this lesson, you'll also have the worksheet probably on page 3, ready for next lesson. So give it a go during the week. Think about any questions that you've got. And as always, if you know somebody who you think would benefit from these lessons, somebody who you know is learning English, make sure you let them know. And we'll be here again next week, so we hope you can join us. Thanks again, and goodbye.